What if the thoughts that keep circling in your head aren't mistakes of the mind at all? What if they're signals? A coded message from the parts of you that refuse to stay silent. The heaviest prisons don't need walls. No iron bars. No locked doors. Just the endless echo of your own thinking. You lie awake at night. Your body is still. But inside, you're running. Running through memories you can't change. Replaying arguments you already lost. Rehearsing conversations that will never happen. And you whisper to yourself, "Why can't I stop?" Freud once said, "The psyche has ways of binding us more tightly than any external chain." His patients didn't need enemies. Their own thoughts played both judge and jailer. Jung carried the idea further. He saw that the figures we push away from consciousness don't vanish. They return as voices. They cluster as complexes. And in the quiet hours of the night, it is those complexes that think through you. This is why you feel trapped in an empty room, because it isn't empty. It's crowded with fragments of you. Picture this. A young man leaves a meeting. On the train home, he replays every word he said. He laughs at himself, then cringes, then argues with an invisible critic in his head. By the time he arrives home, the meeting is long over, but he's still inside it, battling ghosts no one else can see. Or a woman checks her phone, waiting for a reply. The silence grows heavy. Her thoughts spin into stories. Maybe I said too much. Maybe I'll always be too much. By the time the message arrives, she's already lived through 10 rejections in her mind. Different faces, different days, same trap. And that trap has a history. Freud believed obsessive thinking was rooted in psychic fixation, a part of the psyche frozen in an old scene. The mind circles it endlessly, like an animal pacing the cage it cannot escape. He saw this most clearly in his patients with neuroses. A woman who washed her hands 100 times a day wasn't only cleaning, she was binding her anxiety to ritual. Her thoughts hardened into ritual, and the ritual became the cell. Freud called this the repetition compulsion of thought, the return of what was repressed, masked as endless overthinking. Jung shifts the lens. For him, it wasn't simply repression, it was fragmentation. When trauma is not faced, the psyche doesn't erase it. It splits. It seals the memory off in a separate chamber. And that sealed chamber becomes a complex. But the complex is not silent. It has energy. It has will. It has a voice. That's why you feel thoughts taking over. They don't feel like your thoughts. They don't belong to the present. They speak with older mouths. They belong to fragments of you, younger selves, forgotten wounds, abandoned shadows, each one speaking from the dark. When you say, "I can't stop thinking about it," what you really mean is, part of me won't stop speaking. Think of the last time your mind spun in circles. You told yourself, "Stop thinking, move on." But the harder you tried, the louder it grew. Why? Because suppression is fuel. What you push away in daylight waits for you at night. Freud noticed this in dreams. He said dreams are escape routes for repressed material. The thought you silence by day returns in symbols while you sleep. Jung experienced the same in his visions. In the Red Book, he recorded dialogues with voices inside him. Strange, threatening, even divine. At first, he thought they were intrusions. Later, he realized they were messages. And when he engaged them, the trap loosened. So here's the unsettling possibility. You're not just overthinking, you're overhearing. Overhearing a conflict between parts of yourself. Overhearing a conversation you've avoided. Overhearing the shadow trying to speak. That changes everything. Because instead of saying, "I'm stuck in my head," You begin to ask, who inside me is speaking right now? Listen, there was a woman. Let's call her Elena. On the outside, she was brilliant, successful, admired. Inside, she lived in torment. Every decision spiraled into endless debate. Every choice felt like a trap. In therapy, her story came forward. As a child, she had a mother who never approved, and a father who disappeared into silence. Elena grew up questioning herself constantly. Am I doing this right? Will they be angry? Should I do more? That inner dialogue never stopped. It hardened into a complex. As an adult, her mother's criticism lived on in her own self-talk. Her father's absence returned as self-doubt. Together, they became the walls of her mental prison. Elena wasn't weak. She wasn't broken. She was haunted. Her thoughts weren't random chatter. They were unfinished conversations. Old lines delivered on a new stage. Here's the part we rarely admit. When you feel trapped in thought, you're not fighting the moment. You're reliving the memory. Freud would say, it's the return of the repressed. Jung would say, it's the complex, alive and active. Different language, same reality. Your thoughts are crowded. Your mind is haunted. So what do we do when the echo won't fade? Start here. Stop calling overthinking a weakness. It's not a sign you lack discipline. It's a sign you carry unfinished business. Then, recognize the voices for what they are. Echoes of the people who shaped you. Parents, teachers, forgotten selves, ghosts in the walls of your psyche. And when you're ready, don't ask to shut it up. Ask what it needs you to hear. Because here's the paradox. The more you fight the thought, the tighter it grips. But the moment you listen, the moment you give it form and name, it begins to lose power. Jung taught his patients to write dialogues with their thoughts, to ask them questions, to let them speak, not to obey them blindly, but to bring them into the light of consciousness. Because the moment the unconscious is made conscious, it no longer rules you in secret. So ask yourself now, the last time your mind wouldn't let go, whose voice was it really? Your fear? Your parent? Your wounded child? The prison was never just the thought. The prison was forgetting that the thought has a face. And here's the darker truth. You can escape a prison with walls, but a prison of thought, you carry everywhere. There is no release until you confront the jailer within. Here's the deeper question. If your thoughts are not just noise, but messages from the shadow, then how do you confront them without letting them consume you? And now the path leads us deeper into the part we often fear the most. You already know the feeling. Your mind loops. It circles the same memory, the same shame, the same fear. And the harder you try to silence it, the louder it grows. That's because thought itself isn't the enemy. What traps you is the refusal to listen. Begin with recognition, to notice the pattern while it's happening. That may sound simple. It is anything but. Because when the thought arrives, it doesn't come announcing itself as a memory. It comes dressed as the present. It arrives as emotion, the sting of shame, the heat of anger, the chill of abandonment. And in that moment, you swear it's about now, this partner, this colleague, this situation. But it rarely is. Most of the time, it's about then, the child who wasn't heard, the teenager who was humiliated, the younger self who still waits to be seen. Freud would say, the past repeats because it has nowhere else to go. Jung would say, the complex is alive and wants to be integrated. Both point to the same truth. What you hear is often an echo, and you take it for the room. So what do? You catch yourself in the act. The moment the spiral begins, you pause and ask, Who is speaking through me right now? Is it really me? Or is it my mother's criticism? My father's silence? My younger self crying out? That one question breaks the spell. Because suddenly, the thought isn't fact. It's a voice. And voices can be questioned. Next, dialogue. Jung's active imagination. He taught that when an inner voice returns again and again, it's not to be crushed. It's to be engaged. Most people try to silence their thoughts, but Jung knew silence breeds rebellion. What you repress doesn't vanish. It waits, and then it erupts. Think of it. If you lock a child in their room and refuse to listen, they don't grow quiet. They scream. Pound the door, become unmanageable. The same is true of your thoughts. The more you slam the door, the louder they pound. So open the door. Ask them, what do you want from me? What are you protecting? Here's a story. A man haunted by thoughts of failure. Every night, you're useless. You'll never amount to anything. He tries distractions, TV, alcohol, endless scrolling. He tries affirmations. I am enough, but nothing works. In active imagination, he lets the voice take shape. He sees a boy, 10 years old, standing in a classroom while the teacher mocks him. The class laughs. The humiliation burns. The voice isn't abstract self-hatred. It's that boy, frozen in time, still repeating the scene. When the man speaks, I remember you. I know it hurt. But you are not worthless. Something shifts. The voice softens. Not because it disappears, but because it has been heard. This is the strange alchemy Jung discovered. The prison wall is not broken by force, but by recognition. Listening softens the walls. Action moves the door. Thoughts repeat because the psyche doesn't know another script. It replays the same scene endlessly, waiting for a new ending. But the ending won't change on its own. It changes only if you act differently. This is terrifying, because the old response feels safe, even when it hurts. If you always withdraw in fear, you know the script. You vanish. If you always lash out in anger, you know the script. You explode. If you always silence yourself, you know the script. You disappear. Different is the unknown, and the unknown feels like death. But only in the unknown does freedom live. Think of it this way. A woman has a pattern. Every time conflict arises, she shuts down. She learned it as a child. Silence kept her safe. But now, every relationship grows distant. Her silence becomes a prison. One day, she chooses differently. Her partner criticizes her. Her body screams, hide. But she stays. Her voice shakes. She says one true sentence. It feels unbearable. But in that moment, a new ending is written. The psyche learns silence is not the only option. The prison door, once sealed, shifts on its hinges. The hard part? Change. Summons resistance. The moment you try to change, resistance rises. Freud noticed this constantly. His patients would inch toward breakthrough, then resist, cancel sessions, forget dreams, cling to old habits. Why? Because the unconscious prefers repetition over risk. Better the familiar pain than the frightening freedom. Jung agreed. He said the greatest danger in shadow work isn't the shadow itself, but the ego's refusal to let go of the old identity. Let's name the pitfalls clearly. Denial. You tell yourself, I don't really repeat. You insist, this time is different. Denial is the shadow's shield. As long as you deny, the prison stays invisible. Projection. You see the voice in others. You say, my partner is controlling. My boss is cruel. But projection is the shadow borrowing someone else's face. The script is still yours. Despair. You recognize the pattern and conclude, if it's unconscious, I'll never change. But despair is the shadow's lie. Recognition itself is already change. The knot begins to loosen the moment you name it. Rushing. You want freedom instantly. But the unconscious doesn't work on deadlines. Each pause, each different act is one brick removed. Patience is essential. Fear of losing yourself. This is the deepest trap. Your thoughts have lived with you so long they feel like you. To let them go feels like dying. But as Jung wrote, what you are is not the whole of you. Or, the death of an identity is the birth of a larger self. So what can you do now, today? Begin with practice. 1. Journaling with the shadow. When the thought spirals, write it down. Then write back. Ask, who are you? What memory do you hold? Let the words come without judgment. Fragments reveal the story. 2. Active imagination. Sit quietly. Let the image or voice appear. Don't silence it. Engage it. Ask, what do you want from me? 3. Conscious action. Choose one scene where you usually fall into the same trap. Do one thing differently. Not perfect, just different. 4. Witness with another. Thoughts thrive in secrecy. Speak them aloud. To a therapist, a friend, even your journal. The moment the thought is shared, it enters consciousness, and consciousness weakens the spell. Freud gave us the map of repetition. Jung gave us the tools for integration. But the walking must be done by you. And here's the paradox you must hold. The thoughts that trap you are also the key, because they show you where the wound still lives. They point to the unfinished story. They demand recognition. The shadow does not haunt you to punish you. It haunts you to be seen. So the next time your mind loops, don't ask, how do I stop this? Ask, what unfinished story is playing here? Whose voice am I really hearing? What would it mean to answer differently? Because in that question, a door opens. And once a door exists, no prison is final. By now, you've seen it clearly. Your thoughts aren't harmless background noise. They have weight. They have shape. They have history. They circle you like ghosts, demanding to be heard. But perhaps as you listen, other voices have begun to rise. Not just the voices of your complexes, but the voices of doubt. Your own uncertainty, whispering questions you're afraid to ask. So let's name those questions. Let's put them on the table. Because the shadow doesn't only live in memory, it lives in doubt. If these thoughts come from the unconscious, am I really responsible? This question is a trap in itself. Because responsibility here doesn't mean blame. It means response. The ability to respond. Freud would remind us, the origins are buried. They were laid down in childhood, long before you had choice. You didn't choose the wound. You didn't choose the silence, the humiliation, the abandonment. But Jung would add, now that the voice is in front of you, what will you do with it? Will you dismiss it? Deny it? Let it rule you in secret? Or will you face it? Responsibility begins the moment you recognize the voice. Not for what happened, but for what happens now. Why does it feel easier to repeat the same thoughts than to change them? Because repetition is familiar. It may be painful, but it is known. The mind clings to the known because the unknown feels unbearable. The prison you know feels safer than the door you don't. Freud called this the death drive, the pull toward what is already written, even when it destroys us. Not because it brings joy, but because it brings certainty. Jung reframed it. He said, repetition is the psyche's way of insisting on wholeness. The loop continues not because you love the pain, but because the psyche refuses to let the wound stay buried. It circles until you listen. That's why change feels like death. Because something is dying. The identity that grew around the wound. the mask you wore to survive, the prison walls that once kept you safe. And only when they die can the larger self be born. What if facing my thoughts makes me worse? This is perhaps the most frightening question, because it feels true. You imagine that if you open the door, you'll drown, that if you look too closely, the darkness will consume you. But here's the paradox. Not facing the thoughts is what consumes you. What you avoid already controls you. What you repress already scripts your life. Freud saw it in his patients. Repressed conflicts returned as symptoms. Jung saw it in his visions. Rejected figures took on monstrous form until he turned to them. The darkness doesn't get worse when you face it. It only shows its true size. And often, that size is smaller than you feared. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it overwhelms. But pain carried in darkness is poison. Pain carried in light becomes medicine. A story. There was a woman. Let's call her Clara. Every night, her thoughts attacked her. You are a failure. You'll end up alone. She tried to silence them. Alcohol, endless work, exhaustion as medicine. But the thoughts grew louder. Finally, in therapy, she stopped running. She wrote the thoughts down. She let them speak. And slowly, a memory surfaced. A childhood filled with a mother who praised only perfection. Anything less was failure. Anything less was shame. Clara wasn't battling the present. She was reliving the mother's voice in her mind. And once she faced it, once she saw the source, the voice softened. It didn't vanish overnight, but the prison door cracked. What if I fail? What if the loop returns again and again? It will. At first, because repetition has momentum. Habits carve deep grooves in the psyche. The shadow doesn't vanish after one glance. But failure in this work isn't proof of doom. It's proof of life. Every time you notice the loop, even if you fall back into it, you've already changed it. Because awareness wasn't there before. Think of it like loosening a knot. The first pull doesn't release it, but each pull weakens it, until finally it opens. So expect to fail, but see failure as rehearsal. Each time the loop returns, you get another chance to respond differently. If my thoughts are shaped by childhood, does that mean I'll never be free? No. It means the child is still alive within you, still waiting to be acknowledged. Jung would call that child a complex, a fragment of the soul. It is not gone. It is not erased. It waits. Freedom doesn't come by killing the child. It comes by listening, by saying, I see you. I hear you. You are part of me. When you do this, the thought no longer feels like a cage. It becomes a bridge, a way back to the self you lost. But what if this is simply who I am? That is the greatest lie of all. Because you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness noticing them. You are the one who can step outside the loop and name it. Freud showed us that neurosis is not identity. It is repetition. Jung showed us that the shadow is not identity. It is the hidden half of wholeness. The prison is not you. It only surrounds you. And the moment you see the wall, you are already larger than it. So where does this leave us? Here. Every looping thought is not only torment. It is also message. Every spiral is not only trap. It is also invitation. Freud gave us the warning. What you repress will return endlessly. Jung gave us the hope. What you face can be integrated. Together, they tell us, you are not condemned to spin in circles. You are being called into consciousness. So let me leave you with this. Imagine your mind as a labyrinth. The walls are your thoughts. The echoes are your fears. At first, you panic. You think, I'll never get out. But then you realize, The labyrinth isn't built to trap you. It's built to guide you. Every repeated corner is a signpost. Every echo is a marker saying, look closer. You've been here before. And if you follow them with awareness, the labyrinth doesn't imprison you. It leads you inward, toward the center, toward yourself. That is what Freud glimpsed in repetition. That is what Jung found in the shadow. And that is what you are being asked to live. So remember this. The next time your mind loops, don't ask, how do I stop this? Ask, what story is asking to be heard? Whose voice am I really listening to? What door is this prison hiding? Because every thought that traps you is also a key. The question is not whether it will return. It will. The question is whether you will recognize it, whether you will face it, whether you will walk through the door